Hello and welcome to The Print. I'm Snehesh Alex Philip, and welcome to an episode of the Defense Scope where we're doing it a bit differently from what we traditionally do. Now, interesting is the fact that there was a GF414 deal which was in works between India and the US, basically between G and the HAL. The deal was expected to be signed by end of this year. Now we are told that the deal would only be done somewhere mid next year. Now there is also the F404 engines, the deliveries of which were supposed to start 2 years ago, right? But now we are told that the deliveries will start only by about April next year, that is 2025, which means that the entire delivery schedule of the Tejas Mark 1A, which was supposed to begin from March this year, is already delayed and could be delayed more. Now, amid all this, the Air Force fighter strength stands at 31 squadrons as of now. But on paper, that's on paper, but in actual reality, the strength is only about 30 squadrons. So, where does the Air Force stand as of today? And what could be the picture in the distant future? To carry forward this discussion, I have with me two of our finest guests here. One, of course, Air Marshal Diptendu Choudhury. He's someone who retired as the commandant of the National Defense College here in the national capital. Somebody who has a major role to play in terms of coming out with the Air Force doctrine itself. I have also with me Angad Singh. He's an aviation expert, a military historian, and someone that I constantly reach out to whenever I'm faced with anything too technical when it comes to the Air Force. So welcome to the print, both of you.
Thanks, Desh.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nish. Good to be back.
Thank you, sir. Air Marshal, you have the MMRCA contest that was held earlier, of which eventually only 36 aircraft were bought under emergency procurement. Now you're looking at the MRFA contract, and what we've been told by government sources is that they're still confused about to find the least controversial manner to procure the MRFA fighters. What is your take on this?
Oh, it's a long, sad story, simply put. But I think the challenge has been, to my perception, as you know, where the state we are in the Indian Air Force, and like you mentioned, the numbers of the squadrons. It's not just about the numbers of the squadrons. Essentially about what air power brings to the deterrence capability, not a conventional deterrence capability of a nation. Don't forget, we have two strong adversaries, and both with strong air forces. So the criticality of fighters is something I think has long gone past just depending on the Air Force's sense of urgency, which I think it's practically must have exhausted all its scope and options and resources. It's now time for, I think, a much higher level of decision making by policy makers who need to step in and take this forward in a manner, because it does impact our future national security very seriously.
You know, so while we talk about fighters, the fact is that India has an indigenous program, the Tejas program, which is already on. You have the Tejas Mark 1A, which has been ordered for. There's a talk of the Tejas Mark 2, and then there is a futuristic fifth generation, which the DRDO guys would say is actually much more than the fifth generation, which is the AMCA, right? So, what is the big worry out there?
The worry is actually, I'll put it simply, that the gap which has been created between our depleting inventory and the fill rate. Now we've reached a point where the fill rate will never be enough to catch up with the depletion. And we have reached a stage where I think you need to consider the fact that the mainstay of the fleet, the Sukhois, the Mirages and the Mitsunans were any case upgraded. The Sukhoi will need an upgrade, which is the mainstay fleet. The Jaguar will come up to a point. They're all already on extended life, except probably the Sukhoi, which will need a serious upgrade. So the point I'm going to make is that the the capability gap, which is expanding increasingly, is what is the main concern here. And that I don't think has got enough serious attention uh, on what this gap will imply on our national security. And you mentioned the F 404, and just to bring to your point, you said about the Tejas programs. That's been delayed. The F 404 has already been delayed, pushed to next year. Uh, the F414, which is supposed to provide the engine for Mark 2 and possibly the AMCA, has now got pushed to 25. But the challenge here is not just the engines coming in. Once they come in, it takes a long time to get in the TOT, the transfer of technology going. And the biggest, I would say that the Achilles heel is the capability and the capacity of the HL in its production scale. We are just doing 6 to 8 aircraft a year. China, with the J20, is going to reach a rate probably of production of 100 platforms a year. And by 2030 or so, they should have close to 1,000 platforms. That is the seriousness of the gap I'm talking about.
Well, Angad, you someone who's been reporting on the MMRCA much before I did. You're someone who's also reported on the MRF, and you've seen them in action. In your sense, in 2024, given the critical situation, in your sense, what needs to be done on the MRFA contract?
Since you're asking my opinion, I'm going to be a little forthright in my answer. I think we need to procure as many fighters as we possibly can yesterday, because of what the Air Marshal said. Right, air power is the best air force is one you don't have to use. Zooming out from the crisis of numbers and capability and all that, air power is a deterrent. When the US wants to send a signal to Russia or China, they don't move around a battalion of troops or anything like that. They park an aircraft carrier offshore. They'll fly bombers out of Guam in a show of strength, or they'll do a ball tops and send P-52s to the Scandinavian countries and things like that. Air power is your most effective strategic signaling tool. It is your most effective conventional deterrent. And if things get hot, it is inarguably your most effective combat tool as well. So if you accept that as fact, as I do, then we're at an inflection point, the likes of which I don't think this country has seen in 75 years. Our air power has not been this hollowed out in the history of this country. Not since we began building and developing our air force in the 40s and 50s after independence. I'm not over. The way I see it, I'm not overstating it when I say it is genuinely a crisis, and my prescription is go out there and buy what you can as soon as possible, because not doing so invites much greater cost down the line. We can quibble about 50,000 crores here and 100,000 crores there, as the bean counters in government will absolutely do, and as is their right as stewards of public finance. But the opportunity cost of spending and not spending, if you zoom out onto a geopolitical timescale, it's the opportunity cost of allowing other countries to dictate terms to you because you do not have the hard power to back up any stance internationally.
See, Angad, when you say that, we should have bought the aircraft as of yesterday, I completely agree with you. I think even the Air Marshal would agree with you, and probably, let's say, the majority of Indians would agree with you. But what do we actually buy, and how do we buy? Do you want an emergency procurement to be done? In that case, how many? Do you want a Make in India procedure to be done? Then how do you select that? Or do you want a repeat of the MMRCA, or do we buy just more Rafales?
I think, unfortunately, we've painted ourselves into such a horrible corner at this point that there are no good answers. No answer I give, no option I give is one that I'm comfortable with. If I say buy 114 aircraft off the shelf today, I have to stop and ask myself, that's $20-ish billion roughly of forex that I'm basically writing off. If I say build them in India, 100 aircraft, that's a 10, 15, 20-year time horizon I'm adding to our current crisis of numbers. There is no answer at this point, Snehesh, that gives me any sort of confidence or cause for optimism. But the fact is, we have to act. A bad decision is better than no decision at this date, at this point in time. So my preference would be to just try and achieve what MMRCA set out to achieve in round one, in back in what was it, 2003, 20 years ago. Buy and make. Just pick up a squadron off the shelf. Fill out some numbers. We're on the verge of retiring the MiG-21 Bison. We do not have the LCA Mark 1A as replacement yet for that fleet. I mean, just the psychological impact of dropping below 30 squadrons is, I mean, it's not where the world's fifth largest economy and rising power and all that, and then you say that we've basically got the smallest military, the smallest air force that we've had in living memory. That's not something that I don't see India, or I don't want India to go down that path. I don't want India to be that country that doesn't have the stick to match its talk, right? And I would say a squadron or two off the shelf, and accelerate the Make in India process. We have a template now with the C295. Create some sort of achievable ramp rate and delivery rate where you're looking at something like 10 years, or 10 years on the outside. I would say faster than 10 years to deliver your 100-odd aircraft. That's 10 aircraft a year total across the life of the program. The first few years, of course, will be lower. The next few will ramp up. I think that's something that covers all bases, not any of them well, but it serves all purposes to some extent.
So, Air Marshal, I tend to agree with what Angad has said, but the question then comes, what do we actually choose? Do we go in for more Rafales, like what Angad suggested, buy some off the shelf and make rest of them in India on a faster production, with a faster production rate? Or do we do an MMRCA thing where we invite all the people, go through all the trials and tests, and then select the best one?
I totally agree with what Angad said, that we have actually painted ourselves into a corner. And I don't see us, we can get out of the corner, but most certainly it will not be in the way we would have wanted to. So what I'm trying to imply is at the end of the day that we have to look at a long-term solution. But while we are looking at that, we have to look at something which fills our interim needs. And I think the sensible way here would be to probably go ahead for another sort of government-to-government purchase of Rafales on an expedited delivery scale, because the Rafale company, to my mind, has several export orders pending because the fair export. If we had taken the decision some time back, it would have been easier. But now, with every possible year, it gets more and more difficult. And saying this only to buffer the problem of types of forms in the past. And if we get another set of Rafales, another 2 squadrons worth on an accelerated scale, but that is just one step. Simultaneously, we need the HAL to get much more serious. I'm not saying, it's disrespectful to say that they are not serious about it, but now to look at it with a sense of urgency from a national security point of view, rather than trying to reach a business model production rate. It needs all stops to be pulled out. It will need a whole lot of governmental intervention, assistance. This will only help the indigenous to slowly pick up their.
I get your point, sir. I'll be the devil's advocate here. Whenever I speak to the HAL says that we now have a production capability of 16 right now, and 8 more is being added by next year. So they say we can manufacture 24 aircraft per year. But where are the engines? We can't manufacture without the engines. So they blame it on G. But at the same time, Angad, I'll just come to you. But at the same time, and I'll give you the chance to respond to what the HL is saying. But at the same time, when I was speaking to my to people in the government, and they say that one of the big question also is the last time when 2016 when the G2G deal was done, the government didn't nominate the private company that the French maker would have a tie-up with. They say it was a decision taken by the French company, and it led to a whole lot of controversy. And the government, for some strange reason, despite the fact that it's something, it's in power, it has got the electoral backing, but still the government is on a back foot over the controversy. And so the government is saying, one more decision that has to be taken is whether we nominate someone or we just allow Dassault to choose his partner. In your sense, what should it be? What should be done, sir? Do we need a C295 kind of a setup where you have Tata and the Airbus getting into a tie-up, a partnership? Or do you think that HAL can do its job, but HAL has too many aircrafts to manufacture?
I think HAL, while its intentions may be absolutely honorable, I think they're biting off more than they can chew by promising something which is still, they have not built up a capacity. It's very easy to say that, but when you get into a transfer of technology, it takes a long time
Yeah.
to the whole of things. So fundamentally, what I would suggest is, yes, there will be, given the state of affairs right now, there will be controversy in anything you do. And there will be a pushback on anything you do, but the government has to take a decision and bite the bullet, because in the larger interest of national security, I think we are past those points of getting cornered and held at ransom by other issues and not giving adequate weightage to the fact that what is it really doing to the security of a nation, when by the time our AMCA comes out on the flight lines, probably the first few, the Chinese will have an established sixth generation fleet in Tibet, most certainly.
Absolutely. They've just launched their third in your indigenous aircraft, the stealth one that they've just introduced at the ongoing defense show. Angad, you're raring to go. Please
No,
tell
I mean,
us.
I just wanted to circle back to that point you made about production domestically. Look, HAL can have. The fact is, HAL has never hit its maximum production rate for the LCA at any point in this program, right? It used to be 8 aircraft a year. It was ramped up to 12, 16, 24, whatever it is now. I can't even remember. They keep changing the adding capacity at the final assembly stage. That's obviously not the bottleneck. It never has been. As the engine issue shows, as the 404 engine issue shows, the bottleneck is much further up the chain. And until they solve that issue, you have to ask that question, that why isn't the supply chain, the detail manufacturing slowdown, why isn't that being addressed? If we had 12 F404s in the country right now, today, could HAL deliver its first 12 LCA Mark 1As by March 2025? The answer is no, right? So the problem obviously lies elsewhere. So this is something that I don't know. It doesn't take a genius to figure this point out, this issue out. But it's something that somehow managed to go unaddressed for the last 15, 20 years. While we keep hearing about adding capacity in Nasik and adding capacity at aircraft division, that's never the final assembly has never ever been the bottleneck. So why is that receiving so much attention and so much investment? And to the point of the fifth generation argument, that's something that I keep sort of harping on whenever I write or speak on this issue. It's the gap in capability and capacity that's emerging right now in our region is frightening. We have the numbers to, for example, even today, easily see off, say, a Pakistan Air Force, 1:1. But tomorrow, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, we'll be short both numbers and capability. That is to say, 5th gen, 6th gen, and so on. And what happens on that day?
True. That's something which is something that one needs to ponder about. But I think what the Rafales did some favors. I'm not. While the numbers may match in terms of capability, the Pakistani seems to have invested right, and that's one question that I really want to come out with, is the fact that while we talk about fighter squadrons, right, we're talking about capability gap with Pakistan and with China on just the fighter squadrons. But there are other key factors also where we lag way behind. For example, AVAX, right? AVAX view was the airborne early warning and control systems. China has about 60 fixed wing AVAX systems of multiple capabilities. Pakistan has gone itself and bought 9 Saab area AWACS, and it also has the Chinese-built Karakoram Eagle, which is now undergoing a midlife refit. India has six, and
Yep.
it is planning to manufacture 12 more, still in a planning stage, but they're way ahead. Sir, in your sense, are we too focused on the fighters and losing out on the big picture itself? While the fighters are very critical too, but there are other critical factors also.
No, I really don't. I wouldn't really agree on that. It's not that the IAF has not woken up to this challenge. But I will, before I answer this question, or in the process of answering this question, I'll just paint you another scenario. Look at what's happening. The Pakistan Air Force has been actively exercising with the Chinese Air Force for the last since 2011. They've completed Shaheen 10 in the end of last year. And look at the kind of exercises they're doing. This time they've flown the JF-17s and the KJ-500s, their airbags, together, and they have had interchange of crews, and they've been flying this. So it brings in the collusivity of air power, which is on any scenario with any country. You can rest assured that there will be collusivity of air power, because that is something you cannot pin down. So there is, understand this, so even if we are against one nation, you will always have active support of the other air force
Yep.
coming in. And they recently conducted the uh, exercise in Pakistan. And so the active, uh, what would I say? There's a clear understanding in China and Pakistan on role of air power in any conflict with India. But I'm afraid, and I'll be probably a little harsh, and I may be controversial here, but I make no bones about the fact that in the Indian scheme of things, in our national security, we have not really given or understood the challenges of not having a credible air power. And this is something which gets increasingly lost in the continental and the maritime narratives that have been built up over the last years. I mean, that's absolutely justified. I'm not talking about the other services. Every service has their own goals. But to give air power and what it brings to the table of national security in terms of deterrence, in terms of offensive capability, in terms of air defense, which is a huge challenge in today, any conflict today. I think we need to look at it in a much more holistic manner. And you talked about what we call critical enablers, AWACS, AW, aircraft, refuelers. Look at it. Look at the size of Pakistan. Look at the size of India. So just imagine the volume of airspace and the number of platforms that we have. Most certainly, we are in deep trouble. And I have no hesitation in saying this, that unless we get real and wake up to this, challenge which is facing us in the face, only then will we start seeking out of the box solutions. Right now, we are tied down to the procedural aspects of it and the politics of it. But I think it's time we focused on the larger aspects of the national security. What does air power bring to the table? In the future, what will it bring to the table? What is shaping up in the environment around us? And where does India stand? I think if we really address that issue with the hands on our hearts, I think we'll find more solutions.
Well, I agree with you on that, sir. Angad, my last question to you, since we're running short of time, in terms of capabilities. Now, he mentioned that air power in India is often neglected. And you, in your initial sense, that you've never seen a more depleted Air Force, Indian Air Force, than ever before. In your sense, which was the golden period as far as air power was concerned?
It's hard to say. I think things were. Let me put it this way. I think things were looking good in the early 80s.
That is when we had the Mirages and
Yeah, we were on the verge of inducting the Mirage. We'd signed for the Jaguar.
yeah.
We had a running production line for the MiG-21 in Nasik. You had, you had that sense that in a technologically different era, that the Indian Air Force could handle whatever came its way. Of course, I mean it's with the benefit of hindsight, that the 80s were actually sort of the worst time for the Air Force, because they sort of presaged this entire issue where we find ourselves today, 40 years later. There was the foreign exchange, the foreign reserves crisis, and
Yeah.
the late 80s, early 90s saw a lot of missed opportunities, and in my opinion, some avoidable decisions as well. That sort of ended up you compromised and ended up in a situation less than ideal. But if I was me, just back in time to the early 80s, I'd feel pretty confident about where the Air Force and the nation's air power was headed, and I'd be wrong.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. I think my simple take would be is what both Air Marshal and Angad said, that we need fighters as of yesterday. So I think the best idea is to take a decision, buy some off the shelf, manufacture the rest on a fast track basis in India, but get the fighters, get the AVACs and the refuelers on a faster pace. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining here at The Print.